Good morning, class.
Good morning.
This is lesson number 9 of the fall quarter. Today is October the 29th, the year of 2023. The topic of today's lesson is Joshua's final exhortation. The lesson text comes from Joshua, the 24th chapter, the first verse. Then we skip down to the 14th verse and read through the 24th verse. The time is about 1390 BC, and the place is Shechem. The golden text reads, "If it seem evil unto you to serve the Lord, choose you this day whom you will serve. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." That's Joshua, the 24th chapter and the 15th verse. Today's aim, the facts, is to study how the covenant was renewed under the leadership of Joshua. The principle is to show that it is right to follow only the Lord our God and serve him alone. And the application is to demonstrate that as Christians, we are called to follow only our God in a pluralistic society where false gods seek to lure us away. Now, this is the last chapter of Joshua. So this being the last chapter of Joshua, we are seeing that Joshua is coming to an end. And Joshua lived, I believe it's 110, if I'm not mistaken. Joshua lived to be 110 years old. And now he's in his old age. So what we are going through right now is Joshua's last and final words. The last things that Joshua is going to ever mention to these people. Because actually what he's trying to do is bring them back from their long stray away from the Mosaic law. So all of the idol gods, y'all see it in the lesson, all of the idol gods that they've been serving. This lesson is really talking about the idols. Right. So all of the idols that they have decided to serve. And it wasn't just them. It like how I explains to y'all, and I try to talk to y'all about the new generation. And we keep pointing our fingers at the new generation. They're doing this, they're doing that, the new generation. Well, what I've been trying to stress was the things that's going on with the new generation didn't just start with the new generation. Amen. There's something that happened back in the day, a while ago, something that happened that started changing the course of how things are being done today. So by you stopping doing things that you've been taught, by you holding back information that you've been told, these are the things that stops the progress in the new generation. So when you start seeing things about the new generation isn't doing this and isn't doing that the way we used to do it back in the day, the reason it's not being done is because it's something that we have stopped doing. So we can't point our fingers at the new generation, because if we do, you're talking about yourselves too, because we are a part of the new generation. All right, so we'll go on and jump into this lesson. As you notice, it just starts at verse 1 and then we skip. So I'm going to go ahead and let you know, verse 2 all the way down to 13, they're talking about everything that has happened in the past up to the present time, everything that God has done. They're even going back as far as Terah, Abraham's father. And if you keep on reading through that, you'll find that Father Abraham, the father of all nations, that's why I stress that a bad person don't just come from a bad household. So just because your family members are all Christians doesn't mean that you're going to end up being a Christian. Just because everybody in your household are all criminals doesn't mean that you're going to end up being a criminal. Because Abraham's whole entire family was pagans. And if you go back to Genesis 12th chapter, if you go back to Genesis, it talks about how God instructed Abraham to leave his family. Because that's not his life. So if you want to stretch out, and this lesson talks about stretching out too. If you want to stretch out and get something different, you have to go and do that yourself. Nobody's going to do it for you. And it's even going to talk to you about how the devil don't even operate the way you think he operates. You know, people will say, well, the devil stopped me from going to church. No, the devil didn't. No. The devil actually influences you to go to church. He wants you to go to church because the devil is trying to bring everything that he like into church. So all of these devilish things that you're seeing out there in the world, the devil wants to bring that into church. So he's not going to stop you from showing up. He wants you to feel like Christians act like that. That's what he wants you to feel like. So don't start blaming you not showing up on the devil. It's not the devil, it's you. So we start pointing a lot of fingers, but if you realize a lot of the problems that we're facing is nobody else's fault but yours.
That's right.
All right, so it says here, and Joshua gathered all the tribes of Israel to Shechem and called for the elders of Israel and for the heads and for their judges and for their officers, and they presented themselves before God. He called all the elders, everybody of high power, called them all together. So when we seeing they're calling the elders together, all of these high top people together, something is going down. You know, normally when they call all these people together, is either somebody getting punished, somebody getting in trouble, or God has brought forth a new message. So they're coming together because there is a situation that's going on. And like I've explained before, the situation that's going on is they're starting to stray back to the times of before. Back during terror times, you know, they was talking about how they started serving idol gods, you know, and they're saying, you know, we're starting to do too much of this. If you notice throughout the Bible, you never see where God showed a physical body appearance. When he showed up as something that wasn't a person. You know, the burning bush. You know, and the reason being is because God did not want us to see a visual of something that we were going to start worshiping. Because he already said, thou shalt not worship any idol gods. Put no God before me. So, growing up, you've seen houses with pictures of the so-called Jesus Christ. You know, and I know some households, if you was to touch that picture, that would be you. I mean, you would get it. You know, because some people didn't play about that picture. If you grabbed that picture, it was all about leave my God alone. And that's what the first mistake that we have made as Christians. That picture was not God. That picture was just a representation. And that is what God did not want us to do. Find a source to show that's who he is, and now that's who we're starting to worship. So now people are walking around trying to find this white man with long hair. People are trying to find him to say that is God, and God is walking around. That is not God.
Nope.
The idol things is what has brought us back. These idols. Idols has stopped progress. The times of Noah, we're going to get into that too. The times of Noah when he brought the flood came because they started worshiping idols. They started doing a lot of things that God has told them not to do. And because of that, God had to step in and say, all right, this is what I want you to do, okay? Because I'm going to give them another chance, you know. So what I want you to do is I want you to go and tell these people what's about to happen. And those that are on board, they'll follow you, and now they see the power of God. He's not going to have you force anybody. Just like y'all trying to get people to go into church with you, the worst thing you can do is force them to go. The only thing that you can do is ask.
That's all you do.
Will you go with me? And leave it alone.
That's it.
Put it out there and leave it alone. That's it. Because when you start forcing people into church, the things that they end up grasping hold on into church, they blame it on you.
Yeah.
And see, like I said before, the devil is not going to stop anybody from going to church, and he's not going to stop you from showing up. See, the devil wants all Christians to show up. If you've noticed, most Christians today are Christians because someone forced them into church. Someone made them show. If dad is going to church, everybody else is going too. That's why we have most Christians. But the thing about that is, when you're serving God, sin is actually there too. So when you're introduced to God, you're introduced to sin. And the reason is because we're fighting this lifestyle together. We're fighting this lifestyle as a Christian into the Christian world. So by us going out there and we're being a Christian and we're going to church and we're living these laws and we're living these lifestyles like that, the devil wants to pinpoint certain things. The devil wants us to put this out there. The devil wants to say, well, he's a so-called Christian, so if I can bring this into his lifestyle, then he'll say, well, I learned that in church. And if you learn that in church, how can it be bad? I was introduced to this in church. How can it be bad? Well, we have to learn how to listen for God's command. But we're not listening for God's command. We're listening for the things that we want. Like you have a lot of people saying that, well, I'm going through this and I'm going through that. I need to pray. Do you understand what prayer means? Well, I don't want to ask God for that because it just don't make sense. Who else can you ask? If it don't make sense to you, it's not going to make sense to me. So these things that sound ridiculous to you, if you go and talk to God about it, God have a solution. Mm-hmm. I don't have a solution. I'm going to go ahead and move on because I just keep talking and talking. I didn't know that I had a big mouth. I really didn't. I didn't know that. It says, now therefore fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and in truth, and put away the gods which your fathers served on the other side of the flood and in Egypt, and serve ye the Lord. It says, fear the Lord.
Yeah.
It did not say be afraid of God. Look, I grew up, I feared my mother and father. Was not afraid of them. Because when you're afraid of certain people or certain things, you don't deal with them. Being afraid, you try to avoid them. But see, the thing that they're trying to get you to understand is you fear who God is. You fear what God can do. You fear the things that God has, So respect, that's what this is all about. Respect and obedience. Because when you fear, you're going to obey. See, we fear the things that God is about. We know that if we cross God, God will do something to us. God has his way. We're talking about somebody that just says, let there be, and it happened. See, that's who we're talking about. We're talking about somebody that can just speak it and it just show up. If you want a car, God says, let it be a car, and boom, there go one sitting over there. See, this is who we're talking about. Somebody that created all things, heaven and earth, in 6 days. We're talking about a God like that. That's somebody that we do need to fear. Don't be fearful of me. Now, you fear the things that I may hold back from you. And I'm talking to my children. These are things that I might hold back from you for not doing as I ask. So now if you take that and you multiply that by billions and trillions and trillions and trillions, we're talking about God now. Because I can't do very much, but God can do a whole lot. So it says, fear, serve, then put away. Now, why did I break it down like that? Because God did not ask you to get yourself right before going to him. See, that's where we fail at. We try to get ourselves right before going to God. God didn't ask us to clean ourselves first and then show up. Who says we have enough of time to clean ourselves? God says, understand that by crossing me, these things can happen. And by understanding these things, you start serving me. And you serve me because you want to. Not because somebody made you. Not because somebody forced you into it. You serve me because you want to. And by serving me, these things will end up dropping off. Because you'll find that you're holding on to some things that you can't even do nothing with. And while you're holding on to these things, you're like, you know what? What I got that for? I didn't put that down. I ain't used that in like 20 years. So you just throw it to the side because it's no good to you. Now they're talking about the people on the other side of the flood. Now, what they mean by the other side of the flood? These people that caused the flood that came about with Noah. See, all the reason why that flood showed up. See, that is what he's talking about. He's talking about the reason. So now, if you're following people that has been put into a lot of problems because they did certain things and they have not changed, why are you following them? They've been in jail 3 or 4 times. You've been their friend every time they went to jail. Now they're back out and you're still hanging with them. They haven't changed yet. Why are you still there? As God told Abraham, separate yourself. Because there is no growth in there. If you find yourself still hanging into the middle class, if you're constantly hanging with the middle class, constantly doing middle class work, constantly doing things that's going to keep you middle class, how do you expect to be upper class? You can't progress if you're still doing the same thing. So if you're planning on changing for the better of God, and we're going to talk about that too, because God is going to give us a choice to make. See, if you're planning on progressing for God, but you're still trying to do your devilish work, how are you living for God? Like I said, the devil is not going to tell you what to do. The devil is not going to stop you from doing what you're doing. The devil ain't going to keep you out of church. The devil is going to put you in church. The devil is going to be that one that says, you know what? We're supposed to be going to church Sunday. You want to go with me? The devil is going to take you there. The devil is going to walk you right up to the front row. The devil is going to sit you right there, and the devil is going to pinpoint everything that you do in your life in the Bible and say, well, you're doing good. It's right there in the Bible. You're doing good. You're living like God says live because it's in the Bible. Just because it's in the Bible don't mean that's the way you're supposed to be living. This Bible is written out based on certain people that was in the Bible. That's why I've been always taught, don't just read the words, read between the lines, because 9 times out of 10, the things that you are saying is okay for you was only okay to a certain person. And if it seems evil unto you to serve the Lord, choose you this day whom ye will serve, whether that gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the flood, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land ye dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And if you look at the way these things are written, you'll see gods in lowercase. Because all of these gods were idols. That's why they say be mindful of the things that you do in your life. Be mindful. Know why you're doing certain things. Know the reasons why certain things are existing in your life. So if there's, Claire, I hope I'm not stepping on anybody's toes for saying this, but it's in the Bible. So if you want to talk about somebody or talk to somebody about what I'm about to say, talk to God. Okay, so if you are in some rituals, And you start doing certain things like incense, burning sage, bowing down in front of statues. If you're doing any of these things, know the reason why you're doing it. Because all of these things that has been used in rituals, they were used in pagan rituals. Okay, so if your reasonings for doing these things are because, well, I'm doing this because it cleanses my soul, or I'm doing this because it relaxes, and all these, God does all of that. So what is your reason? Why are you doing these things? If you can't come up with a good, valid reason of why, other than, well, it just cleanses me, talk to God about it. Because God is the one that does these cleansing. See, all these other things has been done in pagan rituals. You find very little people today riding around with that air freshener in their car that's shaped like a crown. You know why? Because they've been told that it represents the KKK. And ever since they've heard that, these people throwing them things out of their cars. They stopped doing it. So they were doing things because they didn't have an understanding of why it was being done. It just looked good until they find out what it represents. Once they find out what it represents, then they get away with these things. So before you start doing these rituals, understand why. Know the reason why you're doing certain things. Why is these things existing in your life? Because a lot of these things are against God's commands. A lot of these things were these idols, and I'm stressing idols because whether you want to believe it or not, we all fall prey to idols today. We all do. Dollar bills have "In God We Trust" because idols. We can't do anything without that money. We'll do anything to get that dollar. And see, in most cases, we worship that money more than we do God. We will skip going to church to go and make that money. We will take extra hours just to make that money. But see, that's idle. The new phones that's coming out, iPhone. Now, I grew up in a day when we didn't have phones. And then later on, the only person in the house that had a cell phone was Daddy. And it was a big old phone. You know, so then we came along to everybody wanted a flip phone. If you had a flip phone, you was the man. You got a flip phone. Now if your phone is an Android, you are left behind. I'm one of those with an Android. I can barely even use the Android. I'm not going up to iPhone. I'm sorry. But see, the thing is, we are worshiping these things because as soon as the new iPhone comes out, they got to have that upgrade. Yeah. You don't have to, you want to. No. And the new one is no different than the old one, other than it's a new one. Keep on going. See, serving God, it's not just about going to church, talking God, saying what God is about, and just talking amongst each other about God. That's not serving God. Serving God is doing, living it. When you're out there in the streets, people see that. That's serving God. You can't just serve God on Sundays. You can't just be God around the Christian folks that knows that you go to church. Now, I said it that way for a reason. Because people see you going to church, and as long as they see you going to church, you are considered a Christian to them, as long as they know that you go to church. But when you go to church, do you put church in you? That's the real thing. Is God in you, or do you just blurt out godly things? A lot of people walk around and they act Christian, but are they? anybody can recite scripture. I can't. Okay, I'm sorry, I can't. I'm not one of those that can tell you from the book of Isaiah, go to this. I'm not one of those. A lot of people can quote scriptures. That don't make them Christians.
Right.
Just because you know what the Bible says doesn't make you a Christian. The devil can tell you everything in the Bible. Because the devil has to study the Bible in order not to step on God's toes. See, if the devil can learn the things that he shouldn't be doing for God, why we can't just sit there and look through these things and say, well, this is the only thing that God requires of us. Because out of that whole Bible, believe it or not, there ain't but one commandment that God asks us to live by. And that's love. But the devil has to study that whole book to understand what not to do. And the only thing we have to understand is love. We can't do that. We'd rather fuss and fight over little things instead of love. See, God has standards. Yeah, God has standards. And the standards that God has, they're not like man's standards. See, man require you to look certain ways. Like if y'all know, I done shaved my beard off because I just got a new job and it has to be cut. I hope this passed because normally they say clean cut. You know, I hope this passed. But man tell you that you have to look a certain way, dress a certain way, stand a certain way, walk a certain way. Man requires these things. God's requirement is put him first. That's it. God's requirements is put him first. And then you follow the commandments, which is love. If you do that one thing, y'all know you will never break God's laws. Just that one thing, love. You will never break God's laws. And the people answered and said, God forbid that we should forsake the Lord to serve other gods. Now, these people are saying there is no way we're going to go and live like those people did on the other side that caused God to come and destroy everything. No way we're going to do that. Understand who you're reading now. This is Joshua, okay? So, after Joshua became what? What became after Joshua? Judges. Okay, so now these people said, there's no way we will ever go back to serving idol gods. They're talking to Joshua. Mm-hmm. After Joshua died, what did they do?
Right back. Right back.
They said they would never do it now. Mm-hmm. So then we started getting into judges after that. So it was a judge after judge after judge after judge. They still did it. But they made a promise. And farther down, you'll find that they were witnesses. And they said, look, we're going to hold you to that. Mm-hmm. God is going to hold you to that because you are a witness for yourself. For the Lord our God, he it is that brought us up and our fathers out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage, and which did those great signs in our sight and preserved us in all the way wherein we went, and among all the people through whom we passed. And the Lord drave out from before us all the people, even the Amorites, which dwelt in the land. Therefore will we also serve the Lord, for he is our God. So they said, look, you see everything that God has done did for us? I would be less of a person if I go and serve other gods, because my God is an awesome God.
Amen.
That's what they said. They said, I will not go and serve any other God because our God is an awesome God. He loves us dearly and we love him. Thinking of all the things that God has done. Go back down to, if you have read verse 13, you find that
God put them in lands that they did not have to work. When they got there, there were already places to live in. There was already fields to harvest. There was already cattle grazing. They didn't have to do anything. All they had to do was show up and live accordingly. See, all of the things that they're talking about, God has given them all of these things. So they're saying, this is an awesome God. Why would I go against him? He did all of these things for us. Why would I go and act like those other people did? Y'all know it's always easier said than done.
Yes, it is.
It is always easier said than done. A lot of people say things that they would never do until they've done it. I would never go and dress like that until you have dressed like that. I remember a long time ago, I used to say I would never put on a muscle shirt. Well, as soon as I joined the military and started lifting a little bit of weights, guess what I did? I put on a muscle shirt. But see, these things that you say you would never do, it's only you would never do it until you've done it. And then after you've done it, you can now say, I will never say never. You will do it now. If it came down to it, you would do it because there is nothing that man would not do.
That's right.
Because this body was built out of the sinful world. Now, what's on the inside of this body was righteous. That's what's on the inside. The inside is righteous.
Yeah.
But what you see out here, better be careful how you approach it. Because this is not a righteous body. You know, this flesh can take over sometimes. Sometimes this flesh can take over if we let it. See, we have to learn how to let our spiritual side control it, which is not very hard. Only thing you have to do is what I said before, put God first. When you put God first, God makes sure that you don't do anything that you shouldn't do. Because by putting God first, God controls that spirit. God controls what's on the inside of you. So put God first and he'll allow that spirit to take control of that flesh by putting God first. But when you fail to put God first, the spirit can't interact with God. You decide to do a lot of things. So you're stepping out there. People see you out there in the world. They say, well, I just seen them coming out of church. Well, that person that came out of church was not led by God. He was only in church telling y'all what the Bible says. So now that he's outside of church, guess what? He's ready for the world now. Because he wasn't led by God. And Joshua said unto the people, ye cannot serve the Lord, for he is an holy God. He is a jealous God. He will not forgive your transgressions nor your sins. It is impossible. Look here. It's impossible to look at me after you've done cursed my wife out and tell me that you love me. I haven't heard not one word you said. The only thing that I'm thinking about right now is what you did. What do you think God is doing? Until you have repented to God, the only thing that God hearing right now is what you have already done. So if God don't see any repentance in you and you coming to him saying, God, I will never do this again. I won't do that again. The only thing that God knows is what you have already done because you have not first said, forgive me. And you're thinking that God is going to treat you a little different than I would. See, God is better than me. God will treat you better than I would. But God is not going to let that slide because he's already told us before. He will never mention the do's and don'ts to us ever again. After Moses, and we're talking after Moses right now. After Moses, God says he will never mention the do's and don'ts to us ever again. It's ingrained in us from birth. Have you ever heard a baby say the first words and did not know the word no, or mind, or stop? Because everything is ingrained in the baby. They already know what they should and shouldn't be doing. The only reason these babies keep doing what they're doing is because you keep running the rescue. They learn that by crying, you're going to show up. They learn by saying mine, you're going to stay away from it. They learn these things. We already know. God is not done. God already knows what our hearts are. He already knows where we're going. He already knows what our actions are going to be if he would allow certain things. He already knows. You're not getting over on God. If ye forsake the Lord and serve strange gods, then he will turn and do you hurt and consume you. After that, he hath done you good. Y'all heard what I just said, right? If ye forsake the Lord and serve strange gods, God will turn away and cause hurt on you. Right. See, these idol gods, let me explain to y'all where these idols came from. You remember, way back in the day, they were slaves in Egypt. And they were looking around and they seen all the things that the Egyptians were worshiping. All the gold. So, when they left and was on this journey, they said, well, the Egyptians got these statues representing who their gods are. We need our own. That's where this came from. Like I said, God never showed his face because he didn't want us to start building things, worshiping that, because we will stop talking to him. Every time we want to know something to God, every time we want to say something to God, what we will be doing is falling down before that statue. And forget about talking directly to God. See, to talk to God, all you got to do is open your heart. You ain't got to say anything. Just open your heart. People say, well, they can't speak. They're mute. How they talk to God? Because God speaks to their heart. God don't care about what comes out of your mouth because that pink tornado can say whatever it want to say. But what's ingrained in your heart, you can't change that. There is nothing you can say to change what's in your heart. Now, I'm just speaking. I love you deep, but inside my heart, I can't stand it. That's what matters, is what's in here. Deep hurt, I love him, but what's in here? That's the only thing that matters to God. You can say whatever you want to say, but God knows your heart. I can sit up here and say the best prayer in the world. I can say a prayer that will make everybody jump and holler. I can say whatever I want to say just standing here, but was it in here? It sounds good to you, but God cares nothing for it. And if you notice, most of the time, I'm not pointing anybody out, I'm not saying anything about anybody, but most of the time, you listen to certain prayers that some people pray about, and nothing makes sense. It sounds good, but nothing makes sense. Sometimes you'll sit there and you will listen and you will hear every scripture in the Bible in the prayer, but nothing flows together. It's because it sounds good. It ain't what God says. I had a cousin. Now, I'm going to be honest. He wasn't the most exciting preacher. But if you listen to what he said, you understood and it touched you. My cousin Dooley, his name was Dooley. I called him Dooley. I didn't know his real name. That's because we grew up like that. Nobody said their real names. It was always their nicknames. And they called me macaroni. Ain't nobody knew what my name was for a long time. But his name was Dooley. That was Uncle Aubrey's son. But he wasn't the most exciting preacher. But if you listen to him, the words made a whole lot of sense. It's not about how good you sound. It's about how well you reach. It's about reaching, stretching. When you're doing things for God, you have to stretch out. You have to reach forward. God is not going to allow you to sit here with your arms folded and receive what you want. You have to do something. If you want to touch the world, you cannot touch the world by just standing here saying what the world needs. You have to get out there and do something about it.
That's the way.
And the people said unto Joshua, Nay, but we will serve the Lord. And Joshua said unto the people, Ye are witnesses against yourselves, and that ye have chosen you the Lord to serve him. And they said, We are witnesses. In other words, they said, I promise I'm not going to do anything against God. I'm a witness to that. I'm a witness to what I just said. I will never do anything against God. Here we go in Judges again. But they will never do anything against. See, like I said, these are Joshua's last words, which means these are his best words. His last words means these are his best words. Anybody know what it means to have the last? Your last dollar. And somebody come and ask you for your last dollar, or you're eating a sandwich and someone says, Hey, would you save me the rest of that? That hurts, don't it? Because that last bite is the best bite. When you get that last bite, it's almost like, God, I wish I had some more of that. But it's done. It's over. This being his last words, they're not getting this again. So if they don't get it now, they're not getting it again. Everything about the last thing that Joshua did for these people was the best thing that ever happened to them. This is the chance that they really shouldn't have got. God said, you know what, I'm going to give them the opportunity. So I need you to tell these people this, because I want them back on my side. Like I said, tell them this was Abraham's daddy. They wasn't even in this, they were pagans. They didn't believe in God. Abraham did. And because of Abraham, there was Isaac, and then there was Jacob. Isaac and Esau, they branched off all these things because this was what God had intended to bring forth. The new. Most of them that are in this world here that we're talking about, they didn't experience a lot of the journey. Because them that actually came from Egypt, they died out. So the ones that we have now, they're the ones that should have been paying attention to, as I say, the older generation. But where things started going wrong at, it was either the older generation stopped telling them certain things, or the new generation stopped listening to certain things. So the old generation would say, you know what, we did this and we did that, and I felt like it didn't make much sense. So I'm not going to let them know about that. Or the new generation, they said, well, I saw them doing this, but it didn't make much sense. Well, the reason you are in the position that you're in now is because of what happened. If any of these things didn't happen, you wouldn't be in this position. So if you took something away from what happened for you to get to where you are, you wouldn't be where you are. Many people don't like for their children. I used to be like this, but I'm not now. But many people do not want their children to think they're struggling. They can't afford this. I can't afford that. I don't have it right now. Many parents do not want their children to hear them say, I just can't afford it. I don't have the money. Well, the reason your children keep coming to you, aggravating you about this and aggravating you about that is because they don't know. And when they branch out and leave your house, God forbid, look, I have all daughters, and I'm going to tell you the truth. If I was one of those that kept that little secret from them that says, I just can't afford it, God forbid them get married to a good man. Because when he can't, they not going to understand why, because my daddy did it all the time. So you would need to tell them and explain to them why you can't do certain things so that when they do branch off, they have their husbands' backs. And not just say, you know what? My daddy did it. You should be able to do it too. Because that's going to cause a lot of problems. So we shouldn't be holding back like this generation did in the Bible here. They held back a lot of things, and the new generation just didn't accept a lot of things. And matter of fact, if you paid attention to when Moses came down, see, it wasn't just the followers that was messing up. If I'm not mistaken, Aaron was the one that built the calf. And Aaron was with Moses. Aaron was supposed to have been right there with Moses, his number one side dude. And the first thing that Aaron did was he pointed the finger and said, look, they said do that, you know, and the only thing I did, I threw it down there and it came up like that. Who is he talking to? Did Aaron really believe that somebody was going to believe that all he did was throw this stuff down in the fire and it came up looking like that? Someone had to make it.
Right.
And I think Aaron was the one that was able to do it.
You want to do it.
And, you know, there was a lot of mistakes that's why in a couple of lessons ago, I was talking about owning up to your mistakes. You know, and the reason you need to own up to your mistakes is just like what happened when Moses came down that mountain. You know, when Moses came down, he was enraged. And by him being enraged, he just asked who did it. Nobody owned up to their mistakes. So what he did was he pointed out certain people and said, I need you, and you. Go and kill everybody that did this. How do he know that those that he pointed out wasn't one of them? Because they wouldn't own up to their mistakes. So there could have been a lot of them that died that just wasn't involved in it. And some of them that were doing the killing was probably some of them that was doing some of the stuff. You got to own up to your mistakes. Otherwise, somebody is going to be hurt for no reason at all. Now, therefore, put away, said he, the strange gods which are among you, and incline your heart unto the Lord God of Israel. There we go back to saying put away. All of the negative things you got in your life. Get rid of it. All of these idols that you are worshiping. Get rid of it. All these things that you are now understanding you shouldn't hold on to, get rid of it. Like I said before, these little things that you have started worshiping, your incense and your sages and all these things that you have started doing, now you understand what the true meaning of them are. What's your reason? So now you know what it meant. What is your reason? If your reasoning isn't good enough, get rid of it. God understands all of this. See, God already knows that we're going to make mistakes. He already knows that because we were born in a sinful world. When God made first Adam and Eve, he thought Adam and Eve was going to be perfect, but they made mistakes. They made mistakes. So, being created into the sinful world, we are going to make mistakes. But we shouldn't make the same mistakes. We'll make a mistake until we understand that it's a mistake. Once we realize it's a mistake, that should have been the last mistake of that mistake. Being human, you're going to make mistakes every day. But you should never make the same mistake every day. Once you ask God to forgive you for making that mistake, that's it. God will forgive you once. You make that mistake. Now, I ain't saying that God ain't going to stay with you. God's going to always be with you. You can make that same mistake 100 times. God going to still be with you. Because you're going to still cause more harm to yourself. God do not like for his people, his creations, to be hurt. So God's going to still take care of it. Just don't keep making mistakes. Now it says, and incline your heart unto the Lord God of Israel. Like I said before.
You have to stretch forth to God. When you're making these mistakes, stretch forth. God, I see you. I'm with you. Come to me. Ask God for things. You don't have a lot of things because you're afraid to ask God for them. You don't want to ask God for these things. Who else can you ask? You can't ask me for them. I heard a minister say the other day, he said his wife was praying to God for a parking space. And he says, baby, you can't pray to God for a parking space. And she says, why not? And he said he saw that the whole parking lot was full. And she started praying to God for a parking space. And she drove around to the front row and the car backed out. He came in. So the thing is, you can ask God for anything you want to ask God for. It only don't make sense to you. But God has the answer for everything.
That's right. You're right.
Like I said, you're talking about somebody that all they got to do is say, let it be, and there it go. If God says move, it's going to move. So that's no question. That's not good enough for God. The thing is, will you ask him? Ask him the question. And just him. I'm praying to God. Are you praying or are you worrying? A lot of people are just worrying.
Right.
They're not praying. My light bill is due, and if it don't get paid, it's going to get cut off. I'm praying that God help me. Or are you worrying? Are you worried about your lights getting turned off? Or are you really praying to God? Just let everything go. God, I know it's going to be done. That's why I ain't even worried about it. And you're going on about your business. I know I'm not like that. I'm sorry, I'm not. A lot of people is like that. I'm not like that. My light bill is due. I'm sweating bullets. I got to get it paid. So I'm out doing everything that I need to do to get it done. Because this one little thing that God also said was, faith without works is dead. You know what you need. God gave you the capabilities of getting it done.
Yeah.
So if you
to sit there knowing your light bill is due and you're praying to God, God, bring me the money. Now let me help you understand what I'm saying. If God gave you the ability to be able to go and get this money,
Yeah.
faith without works is dead. But see, if you're one of those that I don't care how much you tried, you would just not be able to go and earn this money because you're either stricken with a disability or you can't go out there and do it. If that's your case, pray. Because that's the only way God's going to give it to you. You have to pray. Somebody might bring it to you. Or it'll just show up. Or like what happened to me one day. I had just lost my job. And all my bills came due. All of them came due. And for some strange reason, somebody paid my light bill. Somebody paid my water. I don't know who did. I still don't know to this day. Somebody paid all of those bills. And My daddy, he says, well, son, I got $5 in my pocket. Go over there to that store. Now, I'm about to tell y'all something that a lot of people say is not Christian like. He says, go on to that store and get a $5 ticket. I did just that because I was being obedient. My dad told me to go to that store. That $5 he gave me was meant to go to that store and get a ticket. So I used that $5 and went to the store, bought a ticket. I scratched that ticket off. Guess what? That's my rent. Oh my goodness. My rent money right there. So there's a lot of things in this world that people look at as being the devil or not Christian like. If God put it in this world, it was God. Anything that you look at that's devilish, it's only devilish to you. Like, I asked my father one day, I said, why you don't shoot pool anymore? He says, the reason I don't shoot pool is because of what it made me when I played. Nothing wrong with it. But if it turns you away from the person that you are, stay away from it. And the people said unto Joshua, the Lord our God will we serve, and his voice will we obey. They have made that promise. I'm only going to serve God. If I hear any voices and it's not God's, I'm not going to obey. I'm not going to listen to any other voice but God. So when I walk up into these new lands and I see silver and gold that God told me to get rid of, I'm not going to touch it. I'm just going to walk on by. That's why we got judges. Because they couldn't do that. These people wanted to take things that God says destroy. God says get rid of it. They want to keep it. God says don't do it. They want to sneak it. Even today, mama and daddy leave the house and say, y'all bet not go across the street. Guess what you'll do? You'll go across the street. But in your mind, it's like, I just make sure I get back before they show up. Strange thing about how God works. When you do that and you make it back in the yard before mom and daddy get back, they already knew where you went. It's either that or you done left something over there and they done called. Because the people that you're trying to hide from ain't the one you need to be hiding from. See, we're hiding from mom and daddy, but God done told them what happened. And I can imagine they riding. Pops probably looked over at her and said, you know they're going across the street. Because they already knew. There is no adult in here that can talk to anyone younger than them and honestly say, I don't know what's going on in your head. Because been there, done that. If you're already in a place where we've already been, if the action is not there, the thought is. Been there, done that. It's impossible to hide anything from somebody who's already been there and done it. You might not have done it, but the thought is there. So as long as, I know I'm done, but as long as us older folk, I know I'm not old, but us older folk, as long as we keep mentioning to the younger the things that we have learned growing up and keep pulling them in the same direction, providing that your direction was a good path. If your direction wasn't a good path, don't lead them down your path because you're leading them down destruction. So as long as your path was a good path, lead them that way and don't leave anything out. Because the person that you need them to be dictates on the person that you're trying to pull them towards. So Follow God no matter what you do. Do what God says do. Obey God. And these idols, don't worship them so much. Money come and go. Cell phones come and go. I done had about 30 of them within 2 years. Cell phones come and go. Many of y'all don't even know what a pager is, but I've had a few of those. They come and go. God is forever. You turn this over to the hands of the superintendent.